Walsingham is, of course, only one of the many pilgrim places in East Anglia, and one of the most famous, before the Reformation, of course, was the shrine of St. Etheldreda in the city of Ely. It's amazing that even now, if you follow the old pilgrim road and the A10 or the A142, there comes a moment when the road veers round and suddenly you get this great vision of the cathedral at Ely in the distance, sometimes called the battleship of the Fens. It looks like a battleship, pretty mighty indeed. Can you imagine if you were a pilgrim 500, 600, 700 years ago, having travelled this difficult distance on pilgrimage, suddenly to turn that road and see your goal ahead of you looming on the horizon in that way? It is indeed a glorious reminder of God, centuries old. And yet, strangely, it ought to remind us that here we don't have any abiding city. If you look through the history of the human race, we've always had this instinct to build monuments to whatever we hold sacred. So we think of that stone circle at Stonehenge, the great Greek and Roman temples, the pyramids, temples and shrines and altars to whatever gods held man's devotion. If you ever wondered at our marble pillared banks and financial offices, I'm sure that's just an extension of the same thought structure. So too, the Jewish people had built their temple. We know so much about their background. They were a nation of wandering tribes, and they settled and left their nomadic life. And they had with them the stone tablets upon which God's law had been inscribed, the 10 Commandments, we call them. And they were kept inside this Ark of the Covenant. So the temple was a holy place, dedicated to worship, and reminded the Jewish people all the time of their special relationship with God. But as so often happens, rules had become paramount, not the thinking which underlay them. So sacrifice had to be offered, animals had to be bought, offerings had to be made, Roman coinage was not allowed, so you had to have money changers. Livestock was sold, and money changers provided the currency. So business flourished on the back of religion. And yet, housed in this very same building, in this same temple, were the commandments given by God so that his people might order their lives rightly. And it was these same commandments which Christ summed up in those 2 great precepts of love. Love your God with all your heart and mind and strength. If you do this, how can you place fame or power or the pursuit of money above him, of other false gods? Love your neighbour as you love yourself. If you do this, how can you cheat him, lie about or lie to him? How can you use yourself or others in a way that lessens the dignity of that person and devalues them? How can you steal from others? Perhaps Christ saw not only the misuse of the temple the desecration of his father's house, as we heard about it in the gospel just now. But he also saw the misuse of people by the hypocrisy of the Jewish leaders. And in that gospel, we see how very angry Jesus gets. And of course, the Jews were stung into self-defense. Then our Lord takes his answer onto another level. Even a temple which took 4 to 6 years to build can be destroyed, but he who is the temple of God will not perish. Daily we're saddened by pictures of lovely centuries-old churches and mosques destroyed in war, looted and burnt, eradicated from existence because of a strange ideology that we can't possibly understand. No longer places of sanctuary and holiness, but mute evidence of man's misuse of power, of our greed and ambition, which has little care for life. And we may feel a kind of despair. These are supposed to be modern, enlightened times, and yet we can still do these terrible things to each other. Those same forces were at work in our Lord's day. We need to turn to him for a solution. And the solution is this, that God is not contained in churches. His words are not chiseled in stone, nor is he destroyed by death. He rises again, and he lives on in human hearts. You and I are his law and his words. In the sanctuary of our temple, he is taken to others. So love is not ruined in a ruined church, nor held captive in a great cathedral. For each one of us is part of the living church, housing the law of love and taking that love to others. Let us listen to the voice of the Lord.